Hello everyone, my name is Phawx. This is going to be my quick look and quick impressions of the GPD Pocket 3. Thank you very much to GPD for sending this out to me for review. This will be going on pre-sale on Indiegogo on November 5th, and I wanted to finish up this quick look and quick impressions before that date because I'm going to be going on holiday relatively soon. So I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, that while this particular quick look and quick impression is going to be fairly in-depth, there are a few pieces that I have not actually gotten a chance to take a look at yet, and I will be able to take a look at that later on. Specifically, the RS-232 port of these new modules that are on the Pocket 3. And really, this is kind of the new hotness that GPD has been doing here, modular-like design. So they have this RS-232 port, and then, which I assume is going to be on everyone's by default, is the vanilla USB-A port. So you can have another USB-A port. And then the big ticket item here is this KVM module, which I'll have greater in-depth look later on in this video. In fact, if you take a look at the chapter links below, if you want to just jump to that, you can go ahead and do that. I have a few things that I want to talk about that, but I'll discuss that in a moment. Let's go ahead and just take a look at what's going on here. So on this side, we can see our right-facing speaker. We have our 3.5mm audio jack. We have two USB-A here, and then we have a mounting hole. Now, this mounting hole that you see here, they're on both sides. This is for if anyone wants anything to do specifically with mounting any particular apparatus that they design. Much like on the GPD Micro PC, you could just mount anything to the bottom of the Micro PC. And the big thing for the Micro PC claim to fame was the RS-232 port. GPD is basically one-upping themselves with the Pocket 3 line by making a union of the Pocket series with the Micro PC, and then also kind of doing this modular design so that potentially other modules might be able to be designed and inserted here as time goes on. For right now, they have an RS-232 port, this KVM port, and a standard USB-A port. So that is this mounting port and what it can do. On the back, we have a multi-gig port here. GPD says this is 2.5 gig. Again, I won't be able to test this until I get to work. I don't have any 10 gig switches here or anything that can do multi-gig here at my house. This is the KVM capture. This is HDMI capture, which is very much really just an HDMI video capture USB thing that you see here. These are like $10. Now, the thing is that this is what makes all the magic happen, this USB-C port. When you plug in here and then plug in the USB-A to the host computer, what happens is all of the keyboard and touchpad basically stop working for the device itself and output via this USB port. And this is really where all of the magic happens. This is the most critical part that makes all of the magic happen. So it's really, really cool. Now, I have had most HDMI stuff work just fine. And again, I'll touch on this later. Even going into the BIOS via HDMI is fine. So if you're doing system builds, this is very, very helpful. However, if you needed to output via like VGA, now I have two different adapters here. They're both powered. So you have VGA in and then HDMI out. I have had success here. I do have an enterprise grade old server here that has VGA out. However, trying to look into the BIOS with VGA, I had not the best success with. I will say that there is a small caveat that GPD is making software that I'll touch base with in a moment. And it's a beta right now. Right now I'm using OBS to capture everything. Here we have our Thunderbolt 4 port, so you can do eGPU and other types of solutions. Here is the charging indicator when you plug in the Thunderbolt 4. And then you have HDMI out, and that's video. That's just so that you can have multi-monitor or you can just export to that monitor. And then on the back here we have our left speaker. On the bottom, let's go ahead and take this out. All right, so there's only 6 screws holding in the bottom housing, and this is all aluminum. And then, oh, that's cool. There's this little nub here that seems to press down on this. Alrighty, so we can see here the controller for the Ethernet port, the multi-gig Ethernet port. Not sure what this chip is. Hopefully that comes in. It's visible enough for you guys. There is a cable that gets flipped over on the other side. Here we have our two beefy speakers. These are pretty sizable speakers. Here we have the large battery. See right there, it says 38.5 watt-hour battery. Look, the motherboard still says Micro PC 2. Here is the ByWin 1TB SSD, and the controller for it is made by HP, I guess, which is interesting. Here we can see over here is where the heatsink is, and then the heat pipe with the fan, a single fan. And then right here is the business end of where all the modules and stuff plug in, which is where all the business happens. Very cool. Well, along the bottom you can see the GPD model number as well as the input that requires 20 volt and 2.25 amp. As well as some other stuff. The other thing that I forgot to mention here is the little lanyard portion, which GPD has also sent me. You can see this is the lanyard that they, I suppose, supply. So you can see that they did supply a lanyard for the GPD micro PC as well. Now, there is actually some utility here in terms of like even just hanging the device. Alrighty, so at this point, let's go ahead and take a look at what is on offer on the inside. I had to turn off all my studio lights just so you can kind of see the backlighting on here, and it's actually super nice, very easy to see at night. Even the caps lock has this like little red indicator light that it's going on. You can turn it off by holding FN and then hitting the space bar if the light was bothering you, and then you can just bring it back real quick. That is the backlight, and also you can see there's some illumination back here because I am twisting this display. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that in a moment, but before I do that, I do want to take a look and show you the fingerprint sensor. It's kind of nuts to show, like, this looks like a completely fake product. The only reason that I flipped this over was just so that the illumination from the LCD itself wasn't causing any, like, so you could just see the backlight of the keyboard itself, which was pretty neat. So right now this does work. So if I just press this, it will go ahead and jump me into my Windows login. And sure enough, I was there without even looking. I don't know what it opened up. Mangroves. Alright, so finishing up on the last few bits of things that exist. Let's go ahead and take a look at the camera app. And you can see that I'm right here. Now, it is a 720p camera. It's 2 megapixel. The frame rate isn't super good, but if you need it for video conferencing purposes, it's quite fine. Go ahead and close out of this. The last few bits that are here, we can see the mouse touchpad, which is really nice. Now, there is no click that is like present on like the GPD Win Max series. So it's a very solid touchpad. If you wanted to, you can single click or double click to bring that up. One thing that is kind of nice and comfortable is to use these buttons over here. So you have left click, middle click, and right click. So if you want to just kind of navigate with your thumb over here and click and drag, or just do right click there, it's fairly simple and super comfortable that way. Here we have the power button that also doubles up as the fingerprint sensor and works perfect. Alrighty, so that is the introduction of this video. We're going to be taking a look at the specs of this device here, literally borrowing this directly from GPD's Pocket 3 IGG page. Let's get straight into it. So there are two versions of the GPD Pocket 3. There's the 1195 G7 high-end version, and there is the N6000 base version. The N6000 base version is using Intel's latest new Atom cores, which I find to be actually pretty good. Unfortunately, I don't have any ability to test that particular device, but I do feel like there is a significant amount of value with that model, and I'll get more into that in the conclusion of this video. But let's talk about the display. The display does support 10-point multi-touch as well as has a pen digitizer. Arguably one of the biggest selling points for the Pocket 3 is that it's housed on a pivoting hinge, so you can fold it flat to be used in a tablet mode or actually in various degrees for multimedia purposes. It features Corning's Gorilla Glass 5. The type of display is HIPS. It is 8 inches diagonally. It has an aspect ratio of 16 by 10. The screen resolution is 1920 by 1200. GPD claims that it is 500 nits of brightness. I have no means of testing this. The screen flickering, it says that it's a DC backlight. This is actually very important. You don't want this to be PWM. PWM can cause flickering. For some people, this causes headaches. Having a DC backlit screen is very nice. Overall, it's just a better backlight for the display. And then the pixels per inch, when you do the math, is 284 pixels per inch. Getting to the meat and potatoes portion on this spec side of the video, I really want to try to distill this down as quickly as possible while being as bite-sized as possible. I will have more to say in the conclusion of this video, but I feel like this is an important part for me to talk about the differences between the high-end and the base version here. So, the 1195 G7 version versus the N6000 version. There are multiple differences on top of the configuration differences that GPD has. The 1195G7 version has Intel's latest CPU architecture being Willow Cove and their latest GPU architecture being Intel G. The N6000 has Intel's latest Atom CPU core architecture and Intel's second oldest GPU architecture. They are completely different. They have two different power profiles. If we take a look at the power profile for the 1195G7, the PL1 is 15 watt and the PL2 is 20 watt, meaning that for brief moments it will run at 20 watt and then fall back down to 15 watt. The N6000 version GPD lists as 6 watt and 10 watt here. I don't have it, so I don't know what they listed it at. Bottom line is there is no way possible that you can run 4 cores with 32 EUs at those standard frequencies and only take 10 watts. The actual TDP of the N6000 is probably closer to 13 to 15 watt. Let's just say it's 15 watt. If we take that information, the 1195G7 version basically starts at 15 watt, and the N6000 ends at 15 watt. These are two different ethos. You either want to have maximum performance and power be damned, or you want to have as much performance as you possibly can and really care about battery life. It is without a doubt that the N6000 version will do a better job in general battery usage. However, the one caveat that I don't like, the configuration that GPD lists for the N6000 is a capacity of 8 gigabytes for RAM versus 16 gigabytes of RAM for the 1195G7 version. This is more or less a deal breaker for me. For me, I need a minimum of 16 gigabytes of RAM for my general CPU usage today. 8 gigabytes of RAM was very 2007 for me. Basically, in 2015, I started using 16 gigabytes of RAM as a minimum. I use more than that today, but I would not want to go back to 8 gigabytes of RAM for a general usage PC. The other major difference, which isn't a deal breaker for me, but might be a deal breaker for you, is that Thunderbolt 4 only exists on the 1195G7 version, and the types of resolutions available on the display outputs on the 1195G7 version versus the N6000 version. That is not a huge difference regarding the resolutions, but it does exist. The remaining two spec differences between the two versions is the capacity difference in the SSD storage. The 1195G7 version has 1 terabyte of storage versus 512 gigabytes on the N6000 version. Having talked about the main differences between these two versions, let's segue into the chapter breaks for the rest of this video. Up next, we'll take a look at dual booting Linux and what works and what doesn't. Afterwards, the biggest highlight I was looking forward to for the Pocket 3, testing out the KVM module. One thing that surprised me was how much I enjoyed using the device in tablet mode, as well as taking a look at general pen input, a mini keyboard review. Additionally, I have some thermal video to show where the hotspots of the device are and what to expect regarding battery life, and then the conclusion of this video. Alright, to start off this quick look, we're going to be taking a look at Linux on the GPD Pocket 3. You can see that we are in the Grub Boot Manager. The distro that I installed is Garuda Linux. Now, you can also see the Windows Boot Manager here, so this is dual booting, and you can easily go between both of them. The one thing that I do want to point out here is that I am running the 1195G7 version. I do not have the N6000 version, so all of my Linux testing is based on that particular chipset. Alright, so here we are in Linux, and one of the things that you might not notice here is that Bluetooth is off. I kind of just cycled it on and on again just to see it happen. There's one small problem that I've had where Bluetooth is pretty finicky to start up on Linux side of things. On Windows there is no problem. It's just on Linux where the module just kind of doesn't do anything. I could try to start it, restart it, and it won't happen. I have to actually physically reboot the machine to get Bluetooth working. So that's one thing that isn't quite working on this. However, most everything else is working. You can see this is, if I touch here, all the touchscreen is working, and I'll show you the configuration file that you have to add. Additionally, if we just kind of hover the pen in front of the screen, you can see that it works without having to touch, but it also follows. And I'll show you the configuration files for that real quick. Additionally, sound needs some fixing. So if you want to fix the sound, you're either going to want to modify or create this file. This is also.conf. And I will have the string that you need to enter here in the description field below that you can just copy. So you're going to want to put that in there and then save the file. And then additionally, for the touchscreen as well as the pen, it's kind of in here as well, but you have to install another module as well. So this is the arguments I have to enter, but the most important part, and this is kind of similar to other GPD products, but you'd always put like the GoodX, the Good 9 digitizer here. because there is a different digitizer here, you have to match the product name with that. So I will have the exact string for you guys to copy here. Once you have that, it's basically the same. You just needed to here's the list of hardware that's on here. And again, this is the 1195 G7 version, so I'm not sure if this is going to be one for one on the N6000 version. I assume that the digitizer is going to be the same, so all the digitizer arguments will be there. But for the sound, that might be different. You might not even have a problem. If we take a look in here, so right there, when we take a look at the hardware list, you can see that GXTP730, that's basically, once you list that, once you know where that is, you can reference it to other files. So just putting in that fixes everything. The only other thing that I installed was the Digimend for the pen support. So if we do... So you can see that Digimend kernel driver that I installed. So between the two conf fixes and the Digimend thing, that was all I needed to get pen support working, the touchscreen working, sound working. Bluetooth is finicky. Sleep has been working for me. I know that some people have said that sleep support on Tiger Lake has been hit or miss. I've been trying now and again to force it into different modes. For whatever it's worth, either forcing it into sleep mode via a button, closing the lid. Any way that I try to enter sleep mode, I haven't had a problem waking up or the display having any issues. So it's been pretty fine. Let's go ahead and actually use this like how you would want to use this thing. So if I do it light, you can see it's nice and light. If I do it hard, light. So there we go. Pen pressure is working in Linux. Everything works as it should. So if you wanted to do art stuff or have pen support that works within Linux, that's all working just fine right now. Again, everything has been working. Sleep support's been working. The one issue that I've had is the wonky Bluetooth on the 1195 G7 version. Additionally, I've looked at the KVM support, and that works just fine on Linux as well. So for all intents and purposes, most everything is working just fine on Linux. Mostly out of the box, there's a few configuration changes that are needed to be made. Again, I'm running Garuda, so that is for that particular distro. It might be different for different distros. So that's pretty much a very quick look at Linux on the GPD Pocket 3. Just so you can see up here, I do have Bluetooth working. I did have to reboot a few times just to get it to work. Once it does initialize, then it's not a problem. But if you boot up into it and you see that Bluetooth isn't working, then 100% you just need to reboot. Again, that is just for the 1195 G7 version. I'm not sure if the N6000 version is going to work. The other thing that 100% doesn't work is this fingerprint sensor. 95% of 99% of everything works just fine on Linux, Bluetooth being the only finicky thing that I had to deal with. But pen support, touch support, sleep state, everything is working just fine. So that's a very quick look at Linux. Let's go ahead and take a look at everything else in this quick look. Having a nice joinder to this, I'm going to be showing KVM running on Linux. Now the important thing to note here is that you can clearly see how much delay is between both of these videos. If you were looking to have the Pocket 3 as an external display, I really wouldn't recommend it. The good news here is that I am using just straight OBS on the Linux side to capture the HDMI part. For the USB part for the keyboard and mouse, it's pretty much agnostic. There's no driver or anything that you need to install on Linux or Windows to get it to work, but you can clearly see that it works as advertised. Again, it's the magic part of the whole part of it. So when you remove the USB part right here, everything, all the keyboard and touchpad functions go back to the Pocket 3 proper, and when I clear it out of it, you can clearly see that I am running Linux again. Let's go ahead and take a look at KVM on my server as well as my home computer. Now this is one area that I was a tad bit disappointed. I had higher hopes for it. It's not It's not an ultimate loss here, but it's not as useful as I was hoping it would be, especially when connecting to a bunch of random machines using legacy types of outputs. I am using an active VGA to HDMI adapter here. Now, the important thing to note is that the touchpad isn't working out of the USB portion, only the keyboard portion is working when connecting to this old server, which is fine. I don't really need a mouse. Having a keyboard active is totally fine. But when I try and reboot the machine and try to see if I can get into the BIOS using the active VGA adapter to HDMI, I had less luck. I saw it briefly, but then wasn't able to actually act on anything. And this was kind of disappointing. So I don't want to write this off just yet, and this is going to be something that I will have to follow up later on. GPD is writing their own software for the HDMI capture portion of the KVM part of this, so hopefully they do a better job of either rapidly switching to different syncs or some other method, but just using straight OBS capture doesn't do a good enough job for legacy types of connections, like specifically VGA to HDMI. However, one absolute win in my home is connecting to my home DVR surveillance system, which was an absolute win. Really happy this worked out, better than using the web interface and better than connecting a physical keyboard and monitor to this. So while I didn't have the perfect success with VGA to HDMI with regard to BIOS interaction, hooking it up to my machine that has HDMI out, I had zero problems taking a look at the BIOS and interacting with the BIOS. So for like system builders or someone who interfaces with a machine that you need to connect to and operate on, the Pocket 3 really is an excellent portable KVM in this regard. I still need to test DVI and DP to DisplayPort to HDMI. I haven't tested that just yet, and that will happen later after I get back from holiday. But VGA works when the operating system is loaded. With the BIOS, I haven't had the best result. HDMI direct native works perfect across the board. So that's really cool. I am still very positive on the KVM functionality in total, but let's go ahead and take a look at the pen input and tablet mode in general. One of the devices that GPD sent me was an active stylus, active meaning it does require power. So this came with a quadruple A battery to power the stylus. This is compatible with other devices like the Surface, so if you already have this type of active stylus, you certainly don't need to buy another. It should just be supported if it supports those other modules. This is nothing specific to GPD, but this is what they sent me and what it looks like. So we'll go ahead and show you that and then show you it in action. Now, I'm by no means an artist, but I can clearly demonstrate pressure sensitivity. Right here we're seeing light pressure versus hard pressure right there. What's really cool is that my palm is pressed right up against the glass, so palm rejection is active. It does take a full beat before being able to do pinch to zoom function. So if you try to rapidly go from your palm and pinch to zoom, it will reject your pinch to zoom because it's rejecting your palm. So if you remove your palm, give it about a full second before you try to do any pinch to zoom functions, and then it will do those things. But outside of that, I mean, again, I'm not an artist, but this gets a very good passing grade for me. I'm overall just really pleased with the tablet function and the pen input function of this. Even just using touch for playing games like Hearthstone.
Your tour ends here. Yeah.
Alright, so a review on the keyboard specifically. For the most part, the keyboard is relatively solid. As a general typist's keyboard, it's fine enough. Now, my word per minute generally is about 90 word per minute. I get around 60 to 70 on this, and even when I'm not looking through a viewfinder. There are some gotchas that, like with apostrophes or commas, that happen that really start breaking my word per minute score, just because those are placed in some odd areas. The other part is like general Linux navigation or system administrator keys, so like piping, backslash, forward slash, apostrophes, brackets, those types of things. You kind of have to hunt and peck for them, and you're going to have to build a muscle memory before those feel comfortable for you. But as a general typing keyboard, it's mostly good. It's just the bottom right quadrant that things get a little bit hairy with the commas and apostrophes as just general typing. Overall, it's like 85% good, which is a general theme with GPD keyboards. I wish that they could be more full keyboards in that regard. And then I'm just going to show you Typing of the Dead, which is just a fun time to be had. And overall is easy enough to use. I would rate the keyboard like a B+. Alright, now for the thermals and battery life portion of this quick look. You can clearly see that I'm running Heaven and I time-lapsed it. PL1 and PL2 is set to 22 watt, but most importantly, take a look at the temperatures. You can clearly see they never ever break 61 degrees Celsius. This is once again GPD just nailing it on heatsink fan design. Excellent, excellent job. Ever since the GPD Win 3, these guys have been hitting home runs with their heatsink and fan design. I'm so glad that these guys have just crushing it on that portion. Now, I was running that at 22 watt. If we take a look through my thermal camera, the heat transference through the all aluminum construction of the Pocket 3, you can see that that thermal activity has an easier time entering into the all aluminum chassis, and a device that you would be using as a tablet as well, I don't really think you're going to have a good time running at a high TDP. Now, I am running this device at a higher TDP than is default. By default, it's 15 watt and 20 watt. It will eventually get this warm when holding in tablet and playing games on the default TDP, which is really why I would recommend running it at a lower TDP and setting that in the BIOS. I myself have been running at 9 watt. I would probably say a max of 12 watt is probably the max that I would want to go on the Pocket 3, especially with how small the battery is. Now, small battery. I say small battery because it's slightly under 40 watt hour. If we take a look at this, the default TDP is 15 watt to 20 watt. After a while, it's going to run at 15 watt. The total system power is 22 watt. That means that we're generally going to be getting less than 2 hours of battery life when playing games and other stuff, when you're trying to push this machine as hard as you can. On the other hand, GPD has released a video on their YouTube channel showing that the device, when playing back video, especially with using hardware video decode, you'll get over 8 hours of battery life. So that is one extreme, and this is the other extreme. My general usage has shown that I was getting around 4 hours of battery life with general usage at the default TDP, and that's a number that I feel confident that you will get on average with just general browsing and general use. So that's kind of where the device sits. You're at a minimum of 2 hours, at a maximum of 8 hours, with an average of 4 hours of battery life on this device. We've reached the conclusion of my quick look on the GPD Pocket 3. Ultimately, when looking at the Pocket 3, GPD has claimed that it's a union of the micro PC with the Pocket line, and I think they did a fantastic job on all fronts. Not only did they complete the union, they added more and the kitchen sink. From having the ability to flip the screen and use it as a tablet with great pen support, to the super awesome KVM module that I still have high hopes of future support from GPD, and with the possibility of new modules coming in the future. Let's get to the pros and cons of the Pocket 3. Pros. B+ keyboard design. Excellent out-of-box Linux support with only a few changes necessary to get it fully working. Again, only the 1195 G7 version is what I tested. Pen input is as good as I was expecting, including palm rejection. Tablet mode is a surprise hit for me. I didn't think it was something I cared for, but I found it quite useful, even just in general browsing. The KVM module does 80% of what I hoped it would do, and I'm so happy it exists. I hope future software from GPD can improve it. The heatsink and fan design is once again amazingly well done. Cooling the chip is fantastic, even at high TDPs. Cons. The 1195 G7 version of the device can get above warm in time with general usage. The default TDP can result in not great battery life for people that don't tinker with the device. VGA support on the KVM module isn't as perfect as I hoped it would be. This is the end of my quick look on the GPD Pocket 3. I hope it was informative. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.